Okay, hi there. Today I'm going to be covering chapter 2-3 for Algebra 2, and we're going to be talking about linear functions, slope, and slope-intercept form. So first thing is I want to quickly talk about slope. Slope is represented by a whole bunch of things. It's represented by the letter m, which comes from y equals mx plus b. M would be the slope in that equation. We also call slope rise over run is another thing. There's a formula for that, which is y2 minus y1 equal over x2 minus x1. And last but not least, in fact, almost most important in some ways, slope is rate of change. All right, and that's an important concept that we try to drive home in algebra. Slope's a huge topic in math, though. You know, when you get to pre-calculus, in calculus, we'll often call it delta y over delta x. That triangle, it means delta is the Greek letter for that. And delta really means change. So it's the change in y and the change in x, which is really kind of the same. It's the same thing as that. If you subtract the y's, that would be the change in the y's. And if you subtract the x's, that's the change in the x. But that's how we represent it later on. You don't have to know that now, but put it out there. So that's the first thing there. I'm going to jump in with number 1 here. And if I said, what's the slope of the line that goes through the points -3, 7, and -2, 4. So in this, I just need the slope, which means I'm going to use the formula, the y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Now you pick one point to be x1, y1, either one. I mean, I usually just go with the first one. The second one is x2, y2, and then I plug the values in. So y2 is 4, y1 is 7, x2 is -2, and x1 is -3. So I get this, and remember, you can turn those two negatives in the middle into a plus, not the -2, that stays as is, but the 2 in between the 2 and the 3. So now I simplify. 4 minus 7 is -3, and -2 plus 3 is +1, which means my slope is -3. And that is the answer. That's all they were looking for. You should memorize these if you do not already have the 4 types of slopes listed here. If I have a graph and see if I can get 4 of these. Okay, so the 4 different kinds of slope is what I'm talking about. So positive slope goes up and to the right. Negative slope goes down and to the right. Zero slope goes straight across. And undefined slope goes straight up and down. Remember that when I'm talking about, sometimes you'll get like a fraction that'll be with a 0 in the numerator. You know, if I had 0 over 5, that's 0 slope. If I had the other way around where the 0's in the denominator, that's undefined slope. Okay? Just so you know, when you use that formula up here, the one we just did, y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1, sometimes you get a 0 either in the numerator or denominator, and that'll determine whether you have 0 slope or undefined slope. So if I go to the next question here, and go number 2, same directions, what's the slope of the line that goes through, right, same directions, 3, 1, and negative 4, 1. What do you get there? So once again, it's good to label your points. x1, y1, x2, y2, y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1 gives me 0 over negative 7, which is 0 slope. And there's an example of what I was talking about above. Why don't you try this one? Same directions. Except your points are 7, negative 3, and 7, 1. Okay, you can try that one. Bring the answer to class for me. If you did this correctly, you should have gotten undefined slope. All right, number 4. What's the equation of the line m equals 1/5 and y-intercept equals 0, negative 3. Okay. So this is easiest done with, it doesn't say which form your equation has to be, so there is a couple of correct answers. I think this is the easiest way to do this, where, you know, my 1/5 is the slope. And remember, if I'm drawing my graph over here, negative 3 would be the y-intercept, okay? And then it has a positive slope, so it goes something like that. But b is going to be negative 3. Any y-intercept will always have an x-coordinate of 0, so this is my y-intercept. So I got y equals 1/5 x plus negative 3 or minus 3. Either one's the same thing. Okay? All right, so that's that answer. Now, here's a big one. Students need to be able to do this, manipulate the equation to get y equals mx plus b. So if I said, write the equation in slope-intercept form, and then I'll take it one step farther and say, what is the slope in the y-intercept? And my equation is this, 5x minus 4y equals 16. So, you know, what I want to do is I want to get y alone, okay? Which means I'm going to manipulate this equation, doing opposite operations. And the first thing I'm going to do is move the 5x to the other side. Okay, so I subtract 5x from both sides. I get negative 4y equals 16 minus 5x, or negative 5x plus 16, same thing. Next, I'm going to divide everything by negative 4. You got to divide everything by negative 4, not just the 16 and the negative 4. So I get y equals 16 divided by negative 4 is negative 4. Negative divided by negative is positive. 5 divided by 4 is 5 over 4x. All right, so, you know, I guess it says slope-intercept form, so I guess I should have the 5/4 first. I really am not that picky about that stuff. What is important is that you know that that's the slope and the negative 4 is the y-intercept, okay? So it doesn't matter which way I write it. The negative 4 is the y-intercept, and the slope is 5/4. So the order doesn't matter on that so much. Whatever's in front of the x is the slope, okay? That's a big one, and it's important that you guys can do that. Line number 6, I believe. Yep. You try. Same directions. Three x plus 2y equals 18, and I'd like you to get y alone and tell me what the slope and the y-intercept is. Okay, so next we're going to tackle some graphing. Now, hopefully you remember from Algebra 1 and geometry and lots of other courses you've taken, I'm sure, about slope and y-intercept. And you know, the y-intercept is the -2 in this case. It's y equals mx plus b. B is the y-intercept. And m is the slope, as we talked about. Now, it's almost easier to graph the way I like to graph when the slope is a fraction. So it's if it's not a fraction, you can always put it over 1, okay? Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start at the y-intercept, and I'm going to do rise over run, all right, you know, with the triangle. So I'm going to start at 2 because that's my y-intercept. So I'm going to go to, remember, this is the y-axis here. So if I go to the y-axis and I start at 2, positive 2, that's my first point, okay? Now I'm going to work with the slope because my slope is -3 over 1, which means I'm going to go, negative slope goes this way, which is one of the reasons it's good to, necessary to have that memorized. So I'm going to go up and to the left. And if I go up 3 and left 1, I'll get my next point. I'm going to run out of space on my graph, so rather than do that, I'll go down and to the right, and that way I'll still have negative slope. Down 3, right 1, down 3, right 1, and I got to, you know, you want to have at least 3 points for your graph, and now I can make my line, put some arrows on it, that's nice, okay. Good form to, if you're going to put more than one equation, more than one line on a graph, you should label your lines, y equals -3, x plus 2, and if you go like that, you know, then I could put another line over here, and you know, put a graph with label with that graph. You know, that would be y equals x plus 1. While we're doing that, why don't we talk about how I got that answer since I gave you one of these. It's really nice to be able to, when they give you a graph, and ask what the equation is. So how did I do that? Well, I started right over here because I see where the y-intercept is, which was 1. Okay, so that's where this 1 here came from. And the next thing I did was I did the rise over run. So all you need is 2 points where the line actually hits the grid, you know, not in between. That one has got to hit just right. And then you make a little triangle and you can go up 1 over 1, up 1 over 1. Now this one may not be quite perfect on this, but it's supposed to be. So the slope would be 1 over 1, which is 1, and that goes in front of the x. So that's why that came out to be such a nice equation, y equals x plus 1, all right? So that's how you could do that. Next, y equals -x. All right, so what's the y-intercept? There's none, Mr. Fleury. Well, there, now, how about now? Is there a y-intercept now? Okay, so here's the y-intercept at 0, and the slope is what's in front of the x, which is, in this case, -1, all right? -1 over 1 or -1, which means negative slope still goes that way. You're going to go up and to the left or down and to the right. So if I go up 1 over 1, up 1 over 1, and then you can make your line. And throw some arrowheads on it, and I got it. Okay, we good? Questions? Those are kind of easy, but students find them hard sometimes because they forget about simple things like adding +0. All right, this one. I think this is the hardest one out of the day. So in order for me to graph this one, I'm going to switch this into y equals mx plus b. Now there's other ways to do this as well, but this is the way we're doing it today. So subtract 3x. And I get -6 minus 3x equals -4y. Next, I'm going to divide everything by -4. And I'll get y equals -6 divided by -4 is 1.5. And -3x divided by -4 is 3/4x. All right, so certainly not the prettiest thing in the world, but well, I'm going to estimate a little bit with this. So this is my y-intercept. I mean, you can switch these two if you like. Move this over here. Move the plus sign in between them. I mean, that's the same thing. Okay. So I got a y-intercept of 1.5. So I'm going to get a little closer here. See if I can hit the right between 1 and 2. Okay. And then I'm going to go up 3 and over 4 in the positive direction, which is that way. So up 3 and over 4 from there. So let's see. Here's 1, 2, 3 and over 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So there's my point. Okay. And I should go do one more, but I've run out of room that direction, so let me go the other direction. I'll go down and to the left. So the rise is still 3, 1, 2, 3, and then left 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. There's the one. Okay, I'll erase these other points. And then I'm going to make my line. And it's good. One reason I like to use 3 points is, you know, if you draw your line in and it doesn't hit all 3 points, if you got a triangle instead of a line, you made a mistake. You should go back and check your math. If you only do 2 points and you make a mistake, you'll never catch it. So that's why I do that. All right, so this one. I want to manipulate it to get y alone. So if I subtract 6 from both sides, I'll get -y equals -2x minus 6. And next I'm going to you multiply by -1 or divide by -1. But what happens when you do that is all the signs switch. So they all went from negative to positive. If one of them was positive, it would go to negative. Okay? All right, so y-intercept is 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 is here on the y-axis. Here's my x-axis. Slope is 2, positive slope. Positive slope goes that way, so I'm going to go down and to the left. Down 2, or this could be over 1, down 2, left 1, and I'm going to make my line now. And that's it. All right, so there's my graphing lesson for today on y equals mx plus b. If you have any questions, whoops, wait, no, I forgot, there's 2 more. The 2 easiest ones in the world that are the ones the students mess up the most. I got these brilliant Algebra 2 honors students, and they always mess up which one's y equals 6. So if I was going to graph this, you know, y equals 6. Here's the y-axis. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 6 is here, which means it's a horizontal line going straight across there into there. Let me move that a little bit. There. So it hits 6 on the y-axis. Okay? For all values of x, y equals 6. For x equals -2, this will be a vertical line going through -2 on the x-axis straight down, which means it's going to have, you know, a y-intercept. There's no y-intercept. This one has no undefined slope because it goes straight up and down. This one up here has a y-intercept of 6 because y equals 6. All right. So those would be 2 that you should be able to graph also. Chances are you see one on a quiz since many students mess them up. And that's all I got for today. You guys can have a great night.